Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Peace be upon you all. I start in the name of Allah, the most merciful and the all merciful. And I hope that you are all safe and healthy, staying at home, doing your work online, and watching videos in these difficult circumstances, which I hope will end very soon, especially that the summer is heating up. And inshallah, very soon we will be able to resume our normal life and normal duties. So I've been asked by some of my friends and online followers of my websites and Facebook and Twitter pages to demonstrate for them the single monad model of the cosmos and duality of time theory. Now, for a long time, I've been reluctant to do that on video because it's really extremely difficult to explain these eccentric ideas which have been developed over the last 30 years. And quite honestly, I sometimes feel that I am myself not able to really understand all the aspects of this mysterious model and can't really accept some of the conclusions that I find when I try to apply it on our everyday life. However, in recent years, more and more overwhelming evidence and rigorous proofs and exact mathematical derivations all indicating that this is really going to be the ultimate theory of everything. Not the least because it reconciles between the two main modern theories of physics, that is general relativity and quantum mechanics. But actually, this model even removes all boundaries between physics and mathematics because not only gravity, but all the fundamental interactions can now be explained based on the new complex time geometry of the duality of time theory. And even the very dimensions of geometry are now related to the speed of light. Therefore, even pure mathematics becomes relativistic. So this model is based on the writings of the greatest master Muhyiddin ibn al-Arabi, a great Sufi figure of the Middle Ages, who left for us more than 300 books. Some of them are quite long, as long as 10,000 pages. So before I leave this title page, I would like to read for you one of the quotes which I have chosen from his famous book, The Meccan Revelations, or Al-Futuhat al-Makkiyah, about the subject of time. So he says, the science of time is a noble science from which you know the secret of eternity. Only the elites of sages may ever come to know this secret. It is called the first age or the age of ages from which time is emerging. So perhaps those of you who are familiar with modern physics and the philosophy of science, and especially the philosophy of space-time, maybe you know that all the indications are coming to the conclusion that time must be an emergent property. So it seems like the greatest master have been knowing this all this time from more than 800 years ago. And before I leave also this title page, let me also explain to you the main idea of the duality of time theory, which is really very, very easy, at least in the beginning. So duality means that we have two levels of time. One is the outer time that we normally feel and we go through. And then at every instance of this outer time, the whole cosmos is being recreated sequentially or in a chronological order in what we call the inner level, or actually we have 6 inner levels of time. And therefore we have real time, which is the inner time, and the outer time becomes genuinely imaginary. And therefore we have now complex time, Ti plus Tr, which is hyperbolically complex. So in the end, we don't have actually like the old series, space and time. We have time or complex time. So the space itself is being recreated internally. So let me start by giving you a brief outline of this presentation, which I think is going to be a little bit long because I have to do a lot of introductions to really introduce a single monad model and the duality of time theory. But the main part of this presentation will be the derivation of the principles of relativity, including special, general, and also quantum, because with this new complex time frame, the background, the space geometry becomes granular and discrete, therefore gravity itself becomes quantized. So what I will do, therefore, I will start by giving you a brief introduction about the ancient philosophical views of continuity and discreteness, and I will try to show you that whether we take the continuous view or the discrete view, we will inevitably end up with some problems and paradoxes, many unsolved problems in physics and cosmology. Therefore, here comes the importance of oneness on which the single monad is based. So from this oneness, metaphysical oneness, we will be able to extract or find how sometimes we have continuous impressions and sometimes we have discrete impressions. Therefore, these two opposite views becomes complementary. So after doing this quick introduction, I will also introduce the principles of relativity for those of you who are maybe not familiar with it, starting even from the classical mechanics and then introducing the three, but there are actually four principles of relativity. And then I will talk very briefly about some of the unsolved, and then I crossed this because actually with this oneness or single monad model and duality of time theory, many of these problems will be simply eliminated or will be solved very easily when we take this view into account. So I will talk very briefly about some of the major unsolved problems, and then I will speak about the single monad model and duality of time theory, but I have to do that very quickly because it's really a very huge subject that contains many details that I cannot go through in this short presentation. Then I will move to the main part, which is deriving the principles of relativity, starting from the constancy and invariance of the speed of light. And I will show in this section that it's actually identical with the fractal dimension of the new complex time or time-time geometry. Then I will also derive the symmetry of physical laws between inertial frames and also between non-inertial frames, which are the second and third principle of relativity. Actually, these two principles are the principles of special relativity, and when we add to them the non-inertial frames, we will be in the general relativity. However, there is actually a fourth principle, which maybe many people, even physicists, believe that it's actually included already in the special relativity, but actually it is not. And actually here is the secret of quantization or granularity of space. We cannot actually derive this equation without taking into account the new discrete symmetry of geometry, which can be only obtained when we implement the single monad model and duality of time theory. So I will show you how can we derive this equation even from classical principles of classical mechanics and in many different ways. And actually it's now known that this equation in its simplest form and even in its modern form, which is the momentum energy relativistic equation, these equations are experimentally correct, but no exact derivation have ever been obtained for them. And even Einstein, before he dies, he acknowledged that the principles of electrodynamic and special and general relativity are not enough to derive this equation. So once we really understand how this equation can be derived, then we will realize that relativity will become quantized. And if we have time, we will speak about the first logical interpretation of the quantum behavior. Actually, there are many things to talk here. This may require a new separate presentation, but I will show you very briefly that based on this new model, we can now understand logically how the quantum systems are behaving, including, for example, the wave-particle duality and why we have uncertainty and how can we calculate this uncertainty, and also, for example, what is the exact meaning of the wave function collapse. So all this we are able now to understand it because of this complementary now continuous and discreteness. They become complementary with the new idea of oneness or the single monad model. So as you can see, maybe it's actually very advanced, and many of the concepts here are quite fundamental, and even many of them have not been discussed by any other scientist before. Therefore, before I even continue, I'll give you even more detailed outline so that you can decide if you really want to follow this presentation or not, because maybe it's not for you, or maybe you can just finish the first part, which is mainly philosophical or conceptual, and then the second part I have divided it into two sections. One is section 1 here, and then another section. So the second section will be a little bit mathematical, but actually it's very simple. So in this first section, I will, as I said, briefly mention the history and philosophy before the single monad, the history of oneness, and even discreteness or continuity of space and matter, and therefore the role of oneness and the single monad model, and therefore the duality of time theory. All this based on the greatest master Muhyiddin ibn Arabi. Therefore, I have actually to introduce this Sufi for you after I do a quick review of the various theories of substance and atomic theories of matter. So I will do that, and then I will introduce the greatest master Muhyiddin ibn Arabi. Then I will mention his first principle, which is called the principle of love, as the primary principle of matter or motion. So this is the main principle behind the creation of the world and behind the motion in the world. This principle actually is even more deep and profound than the most basic principle in physics, which is known as the least action or the Lagrangian. This principle actually explains why we have least action. Therefore, this is actually a very deep principle. Then I will talk about his view of time and cosmology, starting from metaphysics to physics, and how creation began, and how time emerged, and of course also how space emerged. Now, one of the important things that el-arabi always stress is that the whole world is based on 4 principles, actually 5. 4 plus the quintessence, so we have 5. So we have, he calls them the 5 divine the 5 divine presences, or the divine quadratic rule, in addition to the 5th essence. So we have actually 4 or 5. And from this rule, we have the 4 elements in nature, which are the known classical elements, earth, fire, water, and air. However, with a new understanding of them, which is actually very modern, because I will show you that these principles, or these 4 elements, are nothing but the 4 extreme states of matter, which are quantum fields. So it's actually a very modern idea, not the same view of the ancient 4 elements like normal earth or normal water. So based on these 4 or 5 principles, we will have 5 also or 4 levels of symmetry: normal, super, hyper, and ultimate, in addition to the original oneness. So you can say 4 or 5. From here, therefore, we can conclude, or we can understand the single monad model of the cosmos. I will explain this all in details, inshallah. Now, one of the main principles of the single monad model is the recreation principle. As I showed you on the first slide, the whole world is being recreated or created, you can say, in 6 inner levels of time, and then displayed on the outer level. And therefore, we don't have continuity. We have discreteness, but at some levels we have continuous space. So these 6 levels are actually the 6 days. So this is creation in 6 days or in a week, because 6 days as space, which are the same 6 directions of space, which are the 3 dimensions, and time. So for the first time in history now, you can see that the week is not conventional anymore. The week actually is the primary unit of space-time, because every point of space is being recreated at every instance of time in internal 6 movements or motions, primary steps, and then another step to show this whole 3 dimensions. So we have 7. So the weak, when we understand it correctly, will be the main primary unit of space-time together, or complex time, you can better say. Therefore, here I will tell you what is exactly the duality of time postulate. Already I spoke that for you in the first slide, but I will define it very clearly when I come to this point. And then I will show the complex time frame and the two arrows of time. Now, maybe you are familiar with the arrow of time. Now we have two because of the supersymmetry. Here we have actually supersymmetrical two words, hidden and manifest, or physical and psychical, and therefore we have two arrows of time. They always combine together and break this supersymmetry, and also we have even higher symmetries. I'll maybe mention them later. Now, when we understand all this correctly, I will show you that again we will have the same classical concept of ether. However, in a new modern understanding, even better than the ancient one, and actually it will not be necessary to explain why the speed of light is constant and invariant. So actually maybe you know that the ether have been considered invalid because the experiment of Michelson and Morley proved that there is no effect for ether drift, and therefore the speed of light is constant in all directions. However, until now there is no real proof, there is experimental proof, but I mean there is no real understanding why this speed of light is constant. Now, when we understand the real meaning of ether, we will know why the speed of light is constant and invariant in all directions, and also we will be able to solve the many problems associated with the cosmological constant, that is a constant that Einstein proposed in his general theory of relativity. So here, with this new concept of ether, we will be able to reconcile between the quantum view, the quantum field theory view, and then the general relativity view of the vacuum energy. Again, I will speak about supersymmetry and the origin of mass. Now, maybe you all know that the Higgs mechanism was necessary to explain why some particles have mass, although the Higgs mechanism does not explain why the Higgs itself have mass. Here I will show you how mass is originated or is obtained from simple points of space, even starting from classical principles. We don't need all the complicated mathematical new mathematics like sets theory or other modern theories. It's actually very classical principles we are based on. Therefore, based on all this, I will conclude that geometry becomes complex and discrete or granular, and therefore from this I will show you how or why we are actually being deceived and therefore approximating automatically the space-time as continuous, and therefore we have the best theory describing it as the general relativity. So when we are applying the general relativity, we are implicitly making approximation. We are approximating the discrete symmetry into a continuous symmetry or diffeomorphism, and that's why our best explanation of space-time is now general relativity. But when you understand the complex nature of time, you will understand that there is a lower level or a deeper level which is actually discrete, some hidden discreteness or discrete symmetry, which is the basics of the new quantum relativity. Okay, so this will be our first part, and then in the second part, as I said, it will be more mathematical, but actually not very complicated mathematics. Again, as I said, it's really all based on simple classical principles. So I will be deriving the principles of special, general, and also quantum relativity, starting with the constancy and invariance of the speed of light, and I will show you that this is identical, the normalized value of the speed of light is identical with the fractional or fractal dimensions of the new complex time or time, which is the same as space-time geometry. But when we understand how it is discrete or granular. And I will also explain to you why the physics laws are symmetrical between inertial frames and also between non-inertial frames. Now, this principle of the symmetry of the physical laws is now one of the principles of the special and general relativity when we take it as inertial for special and non-inertial for general. However, there is no real understanding, and actually no one even questions why the laws of physics are symmetrical, are the same in all points of space. So with this new discrete symmetry, we will understand why we have such a symmetry of physical laws. But also I will do that with exact mathematical derivations of the proper time, the Lorentz factor, and also of the equivalence principle between gravitational and inertial forces or masses. Now, again, I will also show you at least 4 or 5 different methods of how to derive the famous equation of the mass energy equivalence E equal mc square in its simplest form or in its modern momentum energy relativistic relation. So I'll show you how to derive this starting from classical principles, exact derivations without any approximation or induction based on classical principles in many ways. And therefore from here we will understand the origin of supersymmetry and also the creation of mass. And then we will move to showing that with this new symmetry or discrete symmetry, the momentum becomes complex and also the energy. So far we consider, in physics, we consider energy to be a scalar or just a value without direction. And that's because we have only one direction of time. Now, because we have more than one direction of time, we have now vector energy or complex energy that can be multidimensional. So we can have negative, positive, and even intersecting energies. And this is really a big difference from the classical or the now modern theories of physics. As I said, if we have enough time and energy left, I'll inshallah talk about the first logical interpretation of quantum mechanics with many details here, but I don't know how much I can go because this is a big subject that require maybe 1 or 2 other presentations than that. So let's start with the first part. So from the onset of history, philosophers were thinking whether matter and space and also time can be infinitely divided or we have limits on how small we can go. So in this regard, there were 2 major points of view. One is atomic theory, and the other is the substance theory. So some philosophers believed that there must be some limit on how smaller can we go, and this is called the atoms, but not in the new scientific way, not the atoms we know today that are composed of electrons and protons, etc. But actually these philosophical atoms are utterly indivisible. So some philosophers believe that there must be some indivisible units of space and units of matter. However, other philosophers believe that all the phenomena that we see, all the physical phenomena, are actually have a deeper level, which is called the substance, which there are actually many more than one point of view in this regard. Some believe that there is only one substance, some believe that there are 2 or multiple. So in the end, this substance theory believes that we can divide infinitely, and therefore we have uncountable space or in continuous space. So this ancient philosophical problem continued until modern science. It appeared on many levels. For example, we believe today, all physicists believe that there must be some smallest scale called the Planck scale, where, for example, we have minimum time or minimum distance or minimum energy even, or minimum mass, which we can't go below that. And also the continuity and discreteness appeared again also in light, or is the wave particle duality of light and also of particles. So light itself is now thought to be waves and particles at the same time, and also particles like electrons are also have wave properties. So this duality, or these 2 points of view, are competing always through history, and none of them is really able to explain all the phenomena. And the problem is that at the same time, either if we stick to one point of view, we will not be able to really understand all phenomena, and the same if we stick to the other point of view. So we must take both together, and at the same time they are actually mutually exclusive. It's not possible that something can be waves and particle at the same time, or continuous and discrete at the same time. Either continuous or discrete. This is the main problem. And the problem is that there is no other way, at least on the physical level. So from here, we conclude, or I concluded, that we must really go to the metaphysical level, where things are not really, do not have dimension. We must start from 0 dimension. Instead of thinking on the level of multiplicity, if we start from the metaphysical, where we have no dimensions, and then we think about how can dimensions be created, or how these dimensions emerge, then we may solve this problem. And I found that this problem can be really solved with a single monad model, which explains how all the multiplicity in the world is being recreated or created by one single entity called the single monad, according to the greatest master Muhyiddin al-Arabi. So if we take this oneness or single monad, from this oneness we need to understand first how multiplicity is emerging. And the critical idea here is time, because with the recurrence of time, this unit, or this one being, that is a single monad, is repeating or copying itself and reappearing over and over again in the multiplicity of the world, and creating all these physical multiplicities that we normally see on the outer level of time. So this one being, that is a single monad, is doing all this creation not on the outer level but in the inner levels of time, and that's the importance of the theory of creation by the greatest master Muhyiddin ibn al-Arabi. So this, before I really go on to explain this single monad model, as I promised in the beginning, let me show you some of the main problems that we really need to solve, in order to understand or reach ultimate theory of physics. Now, many physicists have thought about these problems before, but then they decided just to forget them and skip them because they can't solve them. However, as long as these problems exist, we will not be able to really understand how creation is going on, or how the ultimate laws of physics. Our laws of physics currently only explain partial phenomena, but do not explain the realities. Some phenomena are quantized, some phenomena are covered by general relativity or continuous space. But if you really want to understand how things are really going, the ultimate law that governs this physical level we are living in, we really need to go beyond, and therefore see how this creation is being performed, and therefore this new theory must solve these problems. So now I will pass through all these problems, and we will see very quickly that many of these problems will cease to exist automatically when we consider the single monad model of the cosmos. For example, the Zeno's paradoxes, which Zeno proposed more than 2,500 years ago, or 2,450 years approximately. So these problems, or the paradoxes of Zeno, there are actually 40 of them, but maybe we know only 4. Zeno was trying to defend his teacher's or master's thesis, who is Parmenides, who believed in oneness just like the greatest master Muhyiddin al-Arabi. But actually his main book has been lost, where these 40 paradoxes, where he presented 40 of logical contradictions, which proves that there must be no motion and no plurality. However, we have been able to study 4 of these paradoxes, which appeared on other philosophers' works like Aristotle and Plato. So Zeno proved very clearly that whether we take the continuous view of space and matter and also time, or the discrete view, we will inevitably reach a contradiction that there must be no motion and no plurality. However, Zeno himself was not actually denying motion or plurality, because we clearly see motion and see plurality. But he was trying to say that our view or our understanding of motion is not really correct. So one of the very easy actually to explain, and maybe many of you have come across this paradox of Zeno, is the dichotomy. So if you suppose, for example, we want to go from point A to point B. Now, in order to reach from point A to point B, suppose this is 1 meter or 1 unit of space. So we must first pass through the middle point. And let's say this is C. And then from going to point A to point C, we must also pass through the middle point. Let's say this is D. And so on. Therefore, we must conclude in the end, logically, that the whole distance, which is 1, is equal to half plus quarter plus 1 over 8 plus 1 over 16 plus 1 over 32 and so on. However, if you do this mathematical calculation, half plus 1 over 4 plus 1 over 8, etc., you will approach 1, but you will never reach 1. And actually, you will never even start, because you need to divide always and always. You need to divide. So you will not even be able to start motion. So, but in the end, we see motion. We see things moving, and therefore, the only logical way to go out of this is to consider that this division is not always possible. We must reach a minimum point where we cannot divide anymore, and therefore we can solve this problem, at least partially. So, however, if we suppose that space is discrete or granular, then there is another paradox which proves that this also will lead to another contradiction, and this is called the arrow paradox. So let's suppose the same distance from A to B, and let's suppose that we have an arrow that we throw, and then this arrow will reach this point. Now, and we suppose at the same time that the space between them is granular, and therefore there are certain points of space. We cannot divide anymore. So if you suppose that the arrow is going from point A to point B, then this arrow is being or exists in every point of space between these 2 points. And at every point where the arrow exists, its velocity must be 0, because if it moves and then if it leaves gradually this point to the second point, then there is a distance between them, or we can divide this distance between them, and we suppose that it's granular. So it must be 0, it must exist here, and therefore its velocity is 0 here and 0 here and 0. At every point, the velocity must be 0. Yet, the total velocity is not 0. So here we have 0 velocity all over, and the total is not 0, and therefore this is a mathematical contradiction. So there are even more details and more paradoxes, but the conclusion is that whether you suppose a continuous space or a discrete space, you will inevitably end up with a contradiction. Now, many philosophers thought that this is really nonsense, because in the end we have motion, things are going on, and philosophers tried to solve this. And actually the new mathematics, the new calculus is based, the differentiation and integration has been developed based on this idea. However, actually, until now, this problem has not even been tackled correctly, because although the modern mathematics, modern calculus can do the calculation correctly with a good degree of approximation or certainty, but still it's only outside calculation, but it doesn't really solve the philosophical problem whether really space and time or matter is divisible or indivisible. infinitely indivisible, or whether it's countable or not countable, or whether it's continuous or discrete. So these paradoxes have not been really solved yet. Again, as I said, with the recreation principle of the single monad model, this actually solves the problem very clearly, because with the recreation, things are not really moving from where they are to another point where they move to. There is no transmutation, no real movement, but there is only recreation, and therefore things are recreated in the new places. And therefore this will solve actually many problems, even for example the modern problem of non-locality that maybe we will see a little bit further below. So with the recreation principle, we can start by solving the paradoxes, the famous paradoxes of Zeno, and actually I have written some articles about that which can be found on my website and some other publications. So moving on to the more modern history, we have in 1850, starting from 1850, the famous problem of entropy, or the arrow of time, where the second law of thermodynamics is clearly one-directional. However, all other laws of physics, including classical mechanics, including modern physics, all seem to be symmetrical, time symmetrical. So whether we have negative time or positive time, they seem to behave in the same way. However, we all feel the direction of time. We don't feel we can't go to the past. And therefore, until now, we don't have real understanding of how time is flowing. Is it unidirectional or is it multi or two-directional? Until now, it's not understood. But with the duality of time theory, it solves this problem clearly, because time itself is really one-directional. However, we have multiple or we have many levels of orthogonal directions of time. So we cannot really go back, but we have time going in one direction and time going in orthogonal direction, and therefore we don't really interact with this other time. And that's why actually we have, for example, now the problems of black matter and black energy. So we have other levels of existence where time is flowing in a way perpendicular to our direction, and therefore we do not really interact with them. And this is the supersymmetrical and other levels of symmetry that I will speak about later. Then again, the main problem in more modern physics is a Michelson-Morley experiment, which proves that the speed of light is constant whether you go with the direction of the Earth or opposite, whether you measure it in the summer or in the winter. And therefore it proves that there is no effect for ether. The ancient idea of ether therefore were considered obsolete. And therefore this problem, until now, it's proved experimentally, but still we don't really understand why light behaves in this manner. So again, I say that with the single monad model, with the duality of time theory, we will understand exactly, with the existence of ether, why the speed of light is constant and why it is invariant and not related, or it's constant for all observers. Whether observers are moving with or against the speed of light, always we will measure the same value. For the same reasons that I already mentioned now, because the speed of light is actually the speed of creation, and therefore we are living on a level of time orthogonal to this level, to this real level, and therefore we will not see it. We will not be able to affect it. Just like now this things moving on the screen, like myself now when I'm moving on the screen, actually I am moving in a time direction completely not related to the direction of creation of the screen. So the screen of the computer or the television is being recreated or refreshed at a constant rate, and this is the rate of creation or the rate or the speed of light in our case. So this will not have any effect on the things moving on the screen, because it's moving in a time not related to the machine itself. It's related to the film being run or to the character that are moving. This, for example, a laser spot. Now, when I move it, I can move it slowly or quickly, or it can disappear here and come here, because it's being actually recreated. It's not really moving. There is nothing really moving on the screen. And this is the same really happening in our life. When we move through time, when we move through space now, we are not really moving by ourselves, but we are being recreated at every instance of time by one single entity, that is a single monad model. as I will explain maybe later with more demonstrations. Yet again, more modern problems is wave-particle duality. Already I mentioned some aspects of it. So, because the waves are continuous phenomena, the particles are discrete phenomena, and we clearly notice that some, actually almost everything now in nature have this duality. Sometimes behave like waves, sometimes behave like a particle, and we still know how and when or why it behaves in this duality. With the duality of time, real time and outer time, we have real continuous which is a wave phenomena, and outside imaginary, which is a particle phenomena, and therefore the problem will be solved very easily with the duality of time. Yet another more recent problem is a magnetic monopole. Until now, this problem is not solved. This problem appeared by Paul Dirac in the 1930s when he developed the quantum field theory based on the famous Einstein equation E equal mc squared. Actually, the problem is that because we don't really understand this mass energy equivalence, and we take it as granted, we take it as part of the theory of relativity, when actually it is not, because it's the secret of quantization. And that's why Paul Dirac was able to really discover with this equation, when he included this equation with quantum mechanics, he was able to discover the positron and therefore the supersymmetric, or actually this is not yet supersymmetry, but again the other particles, he discovered it by symmetry, and then this opened the door for more particles to be discovered. Until now we understand how all the particles, we arrange them in the standard model of elementary particles. So with this, in this model, until now we still don't understand why we don't observe a particle that have only one magnetic pole. All our magnetic phenomena have dipoles, north and south. Whereas, for example, the electric properties can be positive and negative, and they can be separated without any problem. We have electron, we can separate it from protons and others. So we cannot now separate the magnetic north from the magnetic south. And this is a big problem, because since electricity is quantized, why not magnetism should be not quantized? Especially that actually we don't have as a fundamental force or interaction, we have electromagnetism. So we have only one force together, it's one interaction. Therefore they are closely related to each other. But still until now we have not noticed or discovered any monopole or magnetic monopole. With my new model, we will understand later that the single monad itself is actually a magnetic monopole, and it's only one and unique. There is no other magnetic monopole in the whole creation. There is only one magnetic monopole, and then because this is actually the 0 dimension, and then when it multiplies to the second 1 dimension, 2 dimensions, 3 dimensions, as it creates more dimensions, the interactions become different. So for example, in the 0 dimension we have the magnetic monopole, in the 1 dimension we have the electromagnetism, and then second dimension we have the electroforce, but actually because the second dimension is a plane, we have 2 directions of it. So we have weak and strong nuclear force, and then in the 3rd dimension we have the gravity. And actually this same problem, this same idea solves the problem of hierarchy, because now we still don't understand why these different forces or interactions are way different from each other. Some of them are very big, some of them are very small. For example, gravity is really very, very small, whereas electromagnetism is much stronger, and the nuclear forces are really much, much stronger. So why there is so big difference between these different interactions? The answer is because they are properties of different levels of geometry. So not only gravity is a property of geometry, but electromagnetism, the weak interaction and the strong interactions, all of them are properties of geometry, starting from the magnetic monopole, ending with gravity, and also maybe extending further to other more higher dimensions like 4 dimension and other even. So this will lead us again to more recent problems, and that's the problem of Young-Mills existence and the mass gap, which is also related to the elementary particles, the standard model. As I maybe mentioned, in the standard model, we have particles with mass and particles without mass, like bosons without mass and fermions with mass. But still, we don't understand why fermions have mass. The Higgs mechanism explains why some particles can have mass. But the Higgs mechanism itself does not really explain why the Higgs itself have mass. So we don't have really now a good understanding where mass is coming from. This is actually, this problem is called the Young-Mills existence problem, and the mass gap. It's related to, at least on the mass scale, we must have a gap, not continuous. And this is explained in the single monad model very clearly, very easily, because the monad itself is a bosonic, have zero spin, but when it combines at least 2 or 4 or 8, it doubles, and therefore it creates physical dimensions. We can't have, for example, less than 2. So from 1 to 2 we have a gap, and therefore from 2 to 4 we have another gap, and so on. So we must have a gap for a minimum mass, and that's why also space-time itself is quantized, and with this Young-Mills conjectures will be actually verified, and it's correct. He conjectured even in 1964 that the points of space must be separate and can be combined together to make a discrete symmetry, and therefore we must have a minimum mass for the particles. This is actually the same problem of color confinement, why for example, quarks cannot be separated, and also this is also related to the problem of renormalization. But now with this granular geometry, we don't even need renormalization because we have a minimum discrete symmetry. So these are some of the problems in modern physics. Let me continue with more problems, but I will pass a little bit faster because I want to really go to the main points of our discussion today, that is the single monad. So we have also the horizon problem. This problem doesn't actually exist in the single monad model, because with the recreation, we have internal time, and therefore all the states in the universe are being synchronized internally before they appear on the outside. This problem is now known here in cosmology and astronomy as homogeneity, or why the universe is homogeneous. Now the universe is very large, it's very big. Yet when you look in one direction and you look in opposite direction or in completely far areas of space, you see the same kind of stars, the same kind of galaxies, without any possible interaction between them, because the distance between them, to be able to have any interaction, you need much larger times than the age of the universe. Yet at the same time, the universe is homogeneous. So in the single monad model, because of the recreation, there is internal interaction or internal synchronization before it appears on the outside. So no matter how large the universe could be, it must be homogeneous because it's created by one single particle. That's why it's very easy. Another problem is the problem of spin, the spin crisis. We still, until now, we don't understand how spin, what is the meaning of spin, especially the quantum spin. In the single monad, this is this can be explained, at least potentially, but it's now very difficult to discuss here, so let me skip this point. The cosmological constant problem, again, is one of the problems. This constant has been proposed by Einstein when he wrote his theory of general relativity, his field equations in 1917 or 18. So he supposed that there is a constant to balance energy. However, he later regretted that because he said that the universe is expanding, so there is no need for such constant. That's why he considered it at some point that it's one of his biggest mistakes or blunders. However, in 1918 and 98, some experimental measurements proved that there is really a non-zero cosmological constant, but actually it came out to be really very, very small, comparing to the expected value from quantum mechanics, which is known as a vacuum catastrophe, because in quantum mechanics, the same issue of cosmological constant, there it's called the vacuum energy. Actually, it's infinite, but it can be calculated to a finite value if we suppose a cut at some, for example, as a blank scale. But yet, even at this scale, we have a very large value. Comparing to the measured values, the ratio, the difference between them is about 1 to 120 orders of magnitude. So it's really very, very big difference. It's the worst expectation. And yet, this can be easily, it is a huge difference, can be easily explained in the single monad model, again because of the recreation. And the key here is, instead of doing the calculation of the vacuum energy, instead of summing all over the states of the whole universe or the unit of volume, we don't need to sum because it's being recreated chronologically. So we need actually to take only one state. So instead of summing, we need to take the average, which is a big difference. And actually I found by accurate calculation that the difference is exactly about 120 or 118. So the difference becomes very small between the measured value and the expected value. We already mentioned the hierarchy problem, why the gravity is very weak. And as I said, this is because the gravity is on a 3D level, but other particles, other interactions are on lower levels. So we also have the parity problem, which is related to the arrow of time. Let me skip this. Dark energy and dark matter are also related to the cosmological constant problem, but with a new model of single monad, we have higher levels of symmetry where we have supersymmetry, which solves the dark matter energy, the dark matter problem, and we have hypersymmetry, which solves the dark energy problem, and also it can solve the dark flow. But let me now not comment too much about this. Finally, the problem of quantum gravity is again automatically solved because we have now quantum or quantized geometry, quantized space-time, and therefore geometry. Actually, the relativity theory of relativity is the theory of gravity, and since now the theory of relativity is based on quantized space-time, it becomes quantum gravity. Automatically, quantum relativity, automatically we will have quantum gravity. Now, after doing all these introductions, let me, before going to the single monad model, let me explain to you who is the greatest master, Muhyiddin ibn al-Arabi, from whom I took all these ideas and combined them to make the single monad model and duality of time theory. So his name is Muhammad ibn al-Arabi, or he is actually titled Muhyiddin, the reviver of religion. His full name is Muhammad ibn Ahmad ibn Muhammad ibn Ali ibn Muhammad ibn Ahmad ibn al-Arabi. Okay, he lived in about 700 or 800 years ago. He was actually born in the eastern part of Andalusia in the year 560 Hijri, corresponding to 1165 AD. But he moved first between the different cities of Andalusia and the northern African cities like Fas and Tunisia. And then after about 35 or 38 years, when he was 38 years old, he moved to the east for Hajj, and then he never returned to the west. He lived in Mecca for a while, and then he traveled between the cities in the east, for example, Baghdad, Aleppo, Syria, Anatolia. He even visited Egypt and Palestine. He lived between these cities until he finally settled in Damascus, until he passed away in the year 638 Hijri, corresponding to 1240 AD. So this picture here is the entrance to his mausoleum in Damascus, in the mountain of Qasiyun, where you must enter here downstairs about 10 steps, and then inside here his grave, where people always visit him every day. And when you enter, you will read these different verses and writings from different books. Here, for example, he writes this one famous verse from his diwan. He says in Arabic, فَلِكُلِّ عَصْرٍ وَاحِدٌ يَسْمُو بِهِ وَأَنَا لِبَاقِي الْعَصْرِ ذَاكَ الْوَاحِدُ. I can roughly translate it as, for every or in every era there is only one person by which or by whom it excels, and I am that one for the rest of the age, and he is truly that one. Yes. And this is one verse from Quran. It says, نَبِّئْ عِبَادِي أَنِّي أَنَا الْغَفُورُ الرَّحِيمُ. Tell my servants that I am the forgiver and the merciful. Okay, now we can start introducing the single monad model of the cosmos. So my studies and readings of the greatest master Muhyiddin al-Arabi started actually in the early 1990s, although I was actually informally reading his many books, and my main interest at that time was his interpretation of various verses and chapters in the Quran, especially the chapter of Joseph, because the main story of Joseph, the esoteric interpretation of it is that the human heart, is actually going through different spiritual behavior or existence from his very existence when one is born until he goes through the different stages until he perish and annihilate in the presence of God, so that he can come back again in a new level of existence. So what I want to conclude out of all this in relation to our subject is that this figure here that I chose to put on the cover of the book, which reads in Arabic, أصبحت فيك من الضنا كالنقطة المتوهمة. In English we can say, I became in your love like one abstract point. So the idea is that one is created out of one point and is returning to this one point every time, every moment of time. Although we don't feel it, but we are actually every moment, and therefore our whole life actually is to return to realize our first existence, and therefore when you return to this point you will actually enter a new existence, and always coming between existence and non-existence all the time. So this is the idea of recreation. It started from here, actually very early in 1990s, but actually the formal study started in around 2000 or at the end of 1999, where I decided to really study the concept of time and cosmology, or the creation theories according to the greatest master Muhyiddin ibn al-Arabi. That's why I actually selected this figure to be the logo of the single monad model. This is the importance of it. So that was followed by my first book on the subject, Ibn al-Arabi, Time and Cosmology, that was published in 2005 and republished again several times, actually this one, and then another edition with a different title and slightly different contents focused on the single monad model was published first in 2014. However, during this time, after 2005 until maybe 2014 or even 16, not much really happened until suddenly I realized that I can convert this model into a complete theory, which I will just come to it after a while, which is the duality of time theory. But before I do that now, let me tell you very briefly what is Ibn al-Arabi's idea of creation, starting from the first levels of creation until the creation of the physical world. So what he says is that when Allah, God the Exalted, the creator of the universe, decided or wanted to create things, he first created different or undefined number, unknown number of what the greatest master called the roaming spirits. And they are roaming or consumed in the presence of God. The reason of that is that because Allah, the Exalted, created them directly without any previous stage or any previous creation. That's why they know nothing but Him. they even don't realize their own existence. So that's why they are called roaming or consumed in the presence of God. However, when Allah wanted to create the world in which we exist now, Allah appointed one of these roaming spirits, one of these spirits, and thus He manifested to him in a manner which imprinted in him what Allah wanted to create through him or by him until the last day. That's why this spirit is thus called the first intellect, because he understood or he intellectualized what Allah wanted to create. And also it's called the pen, or the first pen, or the higher pen, okay? Because it actually does this creation by a process of writing, just as we normally write with a pen. We start by putting a point or a dot, and then we move on to make letters one by one. In the same manner, this pen, or the universal intellect, which is also the single monad, and actually it has many other names, all equivalent names, different on the depending on the perspectives. So this single monad, or the higher pen, or the first intellect, is writing in the shadow in which Allah created from him, since Allah is called the light. So when Allah manifested to this pen, it has a shadow formed. So Allah ordered him to write in this shadow what Allah wanted to create. This shadow is thus called the protected tablet, or the universal soul, and therefore the world actually exists in this universal soul, which is defined by, or characterized by two forces. One is the force to move, and one is the force to know, the force of knowledge and the force of motion or providence. So these two forces are actually the two sources of symmetry, the physical world and the psychical worlds. When they complement together, they form one ultimate symmetry, and when they separate, they form different levels. We exist in one level. Actually, we exist in two levels, in both of them. But we normally feel the physical world, and we tend to ignore our inner self. But actually, they are symmetrical. We see the world outside just as a reflection of what is inside. Anyway, this is really a little bit complicated, and I don't want to dive into these complicated concepts before we really want to go to our main subject, that is the physical existence. So the existence started with first multiplying these two levels into 4, and that's exactly because of the complex nature. You know that complex numbers in mathematics have two components, one real and one imaginary. And therefore, you can have 4 different states, either 0, 1, or 1, 0, or 0, 0, or full, or CC in our case. I'll come to this in a moment. But actually, from here we find the first quadratic rule, which is the divine quadratic rule, and from it comes the 4 elements, the hot, or the heat and dryness, and coldness and wet. So these are the levels of nature, although nature itself was not created yet, but the concept of nature is there, implemented in the universal soul before the creation that will appear later in this prime matter. So before I show you the contents of this prime matter, where the universe is going to appear, let me comment further on this divine quadratic rule. So this divine quadratic rule, el-arabi shows in a nice figure here, where the divine essence have 4 characteristics or 4 descriptions which are necessary for him, or for the essence of God to be described as God, as a omnipotent God. Because anyone who is described by these 4 characters, he is like God. However, only one is described by these 4 characters or attributes to the full extent. Also, we are ourselves have these attributes, but they are limited in us. So these 4 attributes, which are living, knowing, willing, and ability, anyone have these 4 attributes with unlimited aspects, then he is God. But only one God exists who has those four abilities or those four attributes. So God is living, God is knowing, all living, he is willing without any limit, and also he is able without any limit. We are also living and knowing and willing and able, but we have limits, and we are limited by what Allah created in us. So from here we find the four aspects of the divine essence, and therefore we have four presences, actually five, because the essence itself is the fifth. So 1 plus 4, this is a basic divine quadratic rule on which the whole cosmos is actually based. We have, for example, the four in physics, we have the four fundamental interactions plus the fifth. Actually, some people say that there is a fifth force, but actually the fifth force is itself included here, which is magnetism. So we don't have it separate, but we have electromagnetism. The magnetism is the initial force of the single monad. That's why the single monad is a monopole of magnetic. So, like if we want to translate this into the modern physics, we can say it is magnetism, and then electromagnetism, and then electroweak, and so on, until we have gravity in the end. And then here we have also other reflections like the fire, earth, water, and air. And also we have the soul, the intellect, nature, and chaos. So there are many levels of this quadratic rule. Let me also show you this in a different way. And this is here, it shows you the complex nature of time. So as I said, since we have two levels of time, they either can be 0, 0, so 0 internal time, 0 external time, or full, both of them. So the real time, which is motion at the speed of light, real time also motion in the outer time at the speed of light. But this is an extreme case. So this is the extreme case of fire or energy. But actually this is dark energy because it exists in a uniform space that has no interaction with any other thing. And actually all these four states and then their conjugate states, which make together 8, they are actually extreme states which do not exist really in nature, but they are actually extremes. So we arrive to them when there is no more creation. The actual creation, for example, here we have C0. We don't have actually C0, we have CV. So C, creation at the speed of light, V, the outer time, we have some velocity, some motion. If we don't have motion, if we don't have time in the outer time, then we have like death, we have flat space without anything else, and therefore this is like vacuum. So these states are extreme states, do not really exist. Practically, they exist at some initial or small velocity, like objects that are not moving or moving only internally. So either we have 0, 0, C0 for normal matter, or 0C for antimatter. You see the symmetry here. And then also we have another symmetry here. This symmetry, when combined together, it breaks to this other symmetry. So actually what's happening is that the world is mixing like this earth and fire, which is the sky. So the sky and the earth are mixing to produce water and air, and the air and water are mixing again to go back to fire and earth. So the world is perpetually going or bearing and breaking. This symmetry is bearing and breaking every moment of time. But our physical world is only created out of water. So out of this vacuum, which is actually a state in quantum mechanics called the Bose-Einstein condensate, which is actually like one state where there is no interaction at all. So this is like inner time without outer time, only creation without motion. The same is also here, but this is actually opposite or orthogonal. So that's why we have matter and antimatter. They are the same thing, only existing on two orthogonal arrays of time. Anyway, let's skip this now and go on to describe more Actually, I explained all this kind of symmetry and levels of symmetry in my book called Ultimate Symmetry, where I have 4 levels of symmetry based on this, actually 5 levels. As I said before, we have the initial level of oneness plus 4 levels. With every one of these levels, we gain new abilities. So in the normal world, in the normal physical world, we have only normal symmetry, like the conservation of energy or the symmetry of normal objects. With this, we have only the willing, we have the acceptance to do things. And then when this combined with the supersymmetrical world, we gain knowledge. When the physical world interact or pair with the psychical world, we gain knowledge. And then as we go to the higher level of hypersymmetry, we gain the living, which is the motion or the spirit. And then with the ultimate symmetry, we gain the ability to do things. However, altogether, when we take them all together, we get the oneness. But of course, absolute oneness is only for God, and we cannot reach this absolute oneness. We only live in these 4 levels at the best. So let me again move on to explain the contents of the prime matter or the chaos. So after creating nature, the level of nature, the first thing to appear is a prime matter, in which the prime or universal body, in which there is the throne, which contains the universe, including all the stars and galaxies, and then the local galaxy and local stars. So the level of the throne is the level of external or outside galaxies, and then outside all this there is the isotropic orb, where there is no, where there is this is the furthest orb beyond which there is no more matter. So this is the first appearance of matter. This is like the Big Bang in the new modern theory. So the world started to appear, forming galaxies, and then inside the main galaxy in which we are living, there is a solar system and the local stars, which will appear here in what we call the pedestal or al-kursi, the chair, on which God is sitting, but not in the physical sense. God actually is mounting all over the throne, mounting in one of the verses in Quran, Allah says, the merciful mounted on the throne. So the throne contains the kursi, the pedestal, and the pedestal contains the earth and the heavens. So now the contents of the pedestal are explained here. Okay, and as you see now, the pedestal is square, or it has 4 sides, and that's because of the quadratic rule that I spoke about first. So the first thing to appear inside it are the 12 zodiac signs, which contains the farthest galaxy or clusters of galaxies, and then below and between those levels there are the heavens, the paradise levels, 7 levels of paradise, and then below all that is a surface of the fixed stars. However, these stars are not really fixed, as the greatest master actually showed, and he even gave approximate values of the proper motion of stars, and he clearly says that stars are really moving, but we don't realize their motion because of our limited lifetime. And this has been confirmed only in the early 19th century. So the greatest master have been knowing this more than 800 years ago or 700 years ago. So the physical world which we are living in appears inside here, which I'm going to show. As you can see, I'm actually moving very quickly because we really want to go to our main subject, that is deriving the principles of our theory, quantum theory of relativity, including cosmospatial and general relativity. So inside the orb of fixed stars appears the solar system with different levels of heavens and different levels of earth. As you can see here, the earth is actually flat, okay, but not in the physical sense, of course. In the physical sense, the earth is spherical, and it is, it rotates around the sun, and it rotates around itself. So this is known physically, and even the greatest master, he spoke many things about how the Earth rotate around itself and around its center. However, in the real sense, in the real fact, when we take the creation and the motion in time and in space, the actual shape of the Earth is really flat. And there are 7 levels, because every sky or every heaven have its own Earth. The meaning of this is actually, the meaning of the Earth here is a dimension. And therefore, for every dimension of heavens, we have a dimension of Earth which is like vacuum and void. So there are higher vacuum and lower vacuum. Okay, so the Earth here is like the ground state. So we have 7 ground states. So you can think of them like 7 fields or 7 states. I will maybe explain that later, but very simply now we can say that, for example, the heavens is like CC, a complex number with a creation on both inner and outer time. That's why it takes spherical, so it's like a wave. And the Earth is like lower vacuum, where we have only real time without any outside time, and therefore it's like 2-dimensional plane, which is a ground state. Okay, so let me move on really more quickly to explain or to conclude the idea, the main idea of the single monad model of the cosmos. So based on all these introductions, we conclude that the whole cosmos, every part, every single point in the cosmos, in the geometry, is being recreated at every instance of time. Recreated by the single monad, which is also called the real, or the real through whom creation takes place. So this real or this monad takes a form at one instance and then takes another form at another instance, and so on. It scans the whole universe. Actually, every one movement, every one point, it takes 1 week of creation, but of course we feel this as one single instance of time. So this is not like the week in which we are living. That's why time actually and the days interfere with each other in a way that I will show in a moment. It's actually really very complicated. That's why I'm struggling actually to show you the main ideas. But if you want really to understand, you have to really read all these complicated things, how time is really flowing internally and externally. But in short, this single monad is making a point or appearance and then another appearance and so on, repeating itself, copying itself. And since we exist on this level of creation, we see this whole picture at once. However, we only see it after it's created. That's why we see the world in a continuous space. Okay? So in reality, there is discrete symmetry. There are granular or separate points. But we see them continuous because we exist in this level. We find ourselves here after the world is created. And this is actually very clearly said in Quran. Allah said in one verse in Quran, I made them not to witness their creation or the creation of the world and the creation of themselves. So we are not really witnessing how the world is being created. We only see the world after its creation, and that's why we feel it's continuous and we feel our continuous existence. Therefore, we actually live in imaginary time. And there is a real time. In this real time, the world is being created in 6 days, and then it appears on the outside in the 7th day. So this monad is alternating between the 2 levels of earth and sky, or void and vacuum, and therefore 7 times. That's why we have 7 earths and 7 heavens. So as you can see in the end, if you really understand these religious verses and theory of creation, you can combine and you can really interpret it in a way that is really scientific, although it looks to us like ancient or some old theories, but actually it's fully scientific when you understand it correctly. And actually, even in ancient philosophy, it's said that Plotinus have said once that from the one, only one can proceed, which is actually correct, but still it's we don't see that. We see multiplicity from the one. We have one creator and then we have multiple creation. So how the multiple creations are proceeding or emitting from one God? To understand this, the greatest master add at a time. So from the one, only one can proceed at a time. From the real, only one creation can proceed at a time, not at once. At once, at our level of existence, we see multiplicity. But at the real instance of time, we see only one creation. And that's why we have seen this verse that is written on the entrance of the greatest master. He says, for every era there is only one person by whom it excels, only one person, and I am the one for the rest of the age, which means that he have reached the level of the real, or being the level of real existence. That's why many people believe that el-arabi actually exists in all the time. But anyway, this is not our subject now. So in the result, the world is actually created in a way just exactly similar to how we observe, for example, a movie, or ourselves when we are now recording videos on a computer or TV. There is no actual motion, there is actually recreation. So the apparent motion that we see is only a change of place or a change of state, but actually nothing is moving, but everything is being recreated. So that's why I show you this figure here, where you see here the colors, for example, are not really, the cells themselves are not really moving, but the colors of each cell are floating and therefore changing every moment, and therefore we imagine that there is a motion. However, in the reality, there is only a change. So if you look from the outside, you see continuous motion. If you look from the real, from the actual process of creation, from the inner process of time, you only see discrete change. You only see reappearance or recreation, and therefore granular geometry. This is the main point of the single monad model, and also the duality of time, that I will come to it in a moment. So in the end, we have creation in 6 days, and then appearance of this creation on the 7th day. However, these days of creation are interfering or taken out from each other, and therefore the dimensions appear. This is actually a little bit complicated. Maybe I will not be able to explain everything here in a short way, but just to show you that this creation process is similar to the creation of 3 dimensions. So we get interfering days of creation, and also interfering yet in another way that is even more complicated. You can maybe go to some articles that I have written about this, how the days or the dimensions actually are intertwined with each other. So in reality, when we are living in our normal days or normal weekdays, at every point we are seeing various points from the actual days of creation. So for example, this white square here, so this white shape, white star here, is, for example, Sunday, but the real Sunday, Sunday of Advent, or the actual Sunday of creation. So this is distributed all over the world. At some point, for example, we are morning, at other point we are evening, at other point we are maybe other time. However, when we go on, we see different moments from different points or days of creation that are mixed with our normal days in which we are living. I'm not sure if you really understand this. Actually, it took me a long time to really understand this complicated concept. Some of the statements of the greatest master took me maybe 10 years to understand. But actually, it was a rewarding, after all, rewarding time that I get in the end. So from here, we see the duality of time, which has been published in this book and also in another maybe informal, or this book is actually more detailed. This is easier and shorter, And also I published the main thesis, the main paper in a separate book called Duality of Time and its consequences on the general theory of relativity and quantum mechanics. So based on this new idea of time, we will be able to really understand what is really time, what time is really is, and also what is space, and is it related to space, and does time and space have a beginning. All these are actually answered. The arrow of time, the entropy, the meaning of the moment, all these actually have been answered in these books, including also some various aspects of the first logical interpretation of quantum mechanics, including the wave-particle duality and also the causality and non-locality. All these have been explained in these books. So again, here also I'm actually planning to write this book, which really is more inclined into the consequences of the single monad model on mathematics, on pure mathematics and number theory. Because I told you that with the new concept of time, there is no more any difference between mathematics and physics, and therefore everything in the universe is like complex number or temporal numbers that range from 0 to infinity, and even pure mathematics will become relativistic because the very dimensions of geometry are identical with the speed of light, as we will see in a moment. So finally, the duality of time theory or the duality of time postulate, it's actually very easy and very short. One simple principle from which all the principles of special, general, and quantum relativity and quantum mechanics, all these principles are actually included in this short postulate, which is actually, for me, it's just a statement that has been already proved. The reason why it's proved, it's a fact, because it solves all the current problems and it makes all the derivations that are not even possible in the current series of general relativity and quantum mechanics. So the postulate says, at every instance of the outward normal level of time, this outward normal level of time, space and matter are perpetually being recreated in one chronological sequence, which forms the inner levels of time, the 6 levels of time, that are also nested inside each lower dimension of space. So the inner levels are nested, 1D, 2D, 3D, and then appearing in the outside as inner time and outer time. So inner dimensions, outer dimensions. The inner dimension altogether are the real time, and the outer dimension is imaginary time. So you can see with this postulate we have now genuinely imaginary. Not like what Stephen Hawking was trying to really he tried very hard to establish the concept of imaginary time, and also in quantum mechanics the imaginary time is useful, but so far in physics, either in relativity or in quantum mechanics, although the idea of imaginary time is being used, however it's only a mathematical trick because it has no genuine presence, genuine effect. The reason is because in order to have a genuine imaginary, you have to have a real part, because genuine imaginary must have a real. So here we have a real time and imaginary time, and therefore they become genuinely imaginary and also genuinely fractal, because we will see that this outer dimension is like a fraction of the inner dimension, and therefore we have genuinely imaginary or genuinely complex and genuinely fractal, expressed very easily through this equation that is hyperbolic or split complex numbers. So we have inner or imaginary and inner or real and outer or imaginary. In the outer time we have objects moving with physical velocity. In the inner time we have creation as a speed of creation, which is the speed of light. So simply we can express this number either as TR, T real, T imaginary, or CV, C the creation in real time, V motion in the outside time. So this is our convention that we will use throughout the rest of the presentation. Therefore, we can now define or express this in a complex time frame where we have internal time and external time. In the internal time, we have real velocity equals c. In the outer time, we have zero velocity. Okay, zero instantaneous velocity, but we have average velocity. So that's why there is no real motion. That's why here these frames are discrete or granular. Okay, so we have frames of space. So normally in our normal life, we don't feel this granularity. We only feel continuous because we don't feel this creation. We only see it after it's created. So we actually feel ourselves continue or moving continuously on this outer time. However, we only live from this. We only live one instance, and then we live another instance, and then we live another instance. So at every instance, we are at no motion. Only we are being recreated. Everything is recreated. So the actual velocity is zero, but only there is average velocity, which seems to be continuous. And from here comes the approximation of general relativity, which I will speak about later. So the real time, just like in the theory of relativity that we know today, the real time is the distance over c on the y, on the x, etc., square and the square root. This is the real time. So since this is hyperbolic, we have the relation here is minus. In the spherical space, we have plus. This is the Pythagorean square relation. But this is hyperbolic, that's why here we have minus, and from here we get the effect of relativity or the Lorentz transformation, which we will see in a moment. Okay, so let's see. So based on this, we can now explain all the principles of relativity all at once from one single postulate, that is the duality of time theory. And that's because the constancy and invariance of the speed of light are now very easily understood, because the speed of light is the speed of creation. The creation is the inner time. It happens when we are outside as one point. So we don't really observe it. We are actually moving on the imaginary time. So the real time is a completely different plane. It's going in a different plane, and therefore this motion, the motion of the speed of light, is perpendicular on our motion, and therefore it has no effect. No matter how much we change outside, we cannot affect or be affected by what is changing inside. Just like the objects moving on the screen of this monitor now, you are seeing this spot of light, the laser point. It's actually being recreated at every point. Therefore, whether it moves slowly or it moves fast, or whether it disappears here and appear here again, like non-locality or the EBR effect. So in the end, you are not really affecting or breaking, or you are not related at all to the speed of light. The speed of light is only related to the creation itself, which is related to the geometry. And actually, the normalized value of the speed of light is exactly equal to the fractional dimension or the fractal dimension of geometry. So this first principle of the relativity is now understood and explained why the speed of light is constant. Logically, for something to be constant always, whether you add, when you try to add to it and stay constant, either this something is infinity, or it exists in a perpendicular plane. So if I try to move here, our motion here is not affected from what is inside. So our motion on the outside level of time is not related to the perpendicular level, which is the plane, which is the real time. So because of this orthogonal crossing, there is no effect on the speed of light, or the speed of light does not affect the motion of observers. This is actually very easy. Okay, so either for logically for the speed of light to be constant, always constant. So if you suppose c plus v equals c, this is correct logically only when c is infinity, or when v and c, when the external, the observer, and the internal, which is the speed of light, if they exist on orthogonal dimensions. Actually, even this first supposition is actually correct for the speed of light, because for us, since we exist only on the outside, internally the creation is happening for us, is happening at once, and therefore there is no motion. That's why we see everything at once. So the speed of light is infinity for us. And that's why if you do the calculation in even according to the special laws of general relativity, if you do the calculation according to the special relativity, like the time dilation, you will see that for the speed of light, time is zero, and therefore the speed itself, for light itself, is like infinite. So the actual speed of light is really infinity, but it appears for us limited and finite because we are lagging behind. We need to wait until we are created again. So we need until the 3 dimensions of geometry to be created. That's why we feel a time lag, and that's why we feel time for the creation to happen, which is the speed of light. So in reality, the speed of light is infinite, or actually indefinite, because what is performing this motion is a single monad, where there is no space and no time. So like zero space over zero time, and therefore it's indefinite. But it looks like infinite. However, for us it looks finite because we are lagging behind, because we have to wait until we are recreated again, and therefore we are always in a time lag. And by the way, this has been expressed in Quran very clearly, but of course not many people can understand this. Allah says in Quran, when Allah of course have told in many verses that He is creating the whole world in 6 days, and then Allah said in one verse, are we tired, or have we become tired from creating the world? Nay, but you or they are unaware of new creation. So we are in lapse, we are unaware or lagging and not seeing, not witnessing the new creation. So this lag is the reason why we see a limited value of the speed of light. But by itself, the speed of light is infinity, and therefore we cannot affect it, we cannot really add to it or subtract from it. And at the same time, it exists in orthogonal dimension. Actually, this is the meaning of orthogonality. This is the meaning when you are moving in a way that you cannot affect the real. You are moving in the imaginary dimension. You are not existing in the real existence. Therefore, you are actually moving orthogonal to the real dimension. This is the actual meaning of the complex number and imaginary number, and at the same time the orthogonality or the perpendicular planes. So we have a genuine real time and a genuine imaginary time. In total, we have orthogonal time or orthogonal levels of time. And the best example is a TV screen where creation is happening and is not affected by the refresh rate of the creation or the appearing or the appearance of the objects on the screen. Okay, let me move further. Now, the main benefit of this duality of time, and this is really the biggest contribution to physics, is now making the speed of light as the primary constant of creation or universe, or the primary unitless actually constant, because it's now no more a space over time, it's time over time. So it's inner time over outer time. Okay, so we have now unitless constant from which all other constant can be extracted, though I have not really done this, but I'm working on that, how to extract other constants from the speed of light in this new meaning as a fractional dimension of geometry. Okay. So, what is actually happening for normal velocities, since we are living in this outside dimension, which is imaginary, we are actually always at zero velocity, but we are averaging from real time to outside time. So either this monad either exists in the inner time where the velocity is c, or in the outer time where the actual velocity is zero. And therefore, if you suppose that an object, for example, ourselves when we are moving, or an electron when it's moving, so if this object, any object or particle, if it's moving in time, it exists in the inner time and in the outer time at the same time, in this complex time. So its actual velocity, outside velocity, it's a summation over the number of monads that are supposed to form this particle. Each one of them is either at 0 in the outside time or at c in the inner time. So we sum either 0 or c over n, from 1 to n over n. Therefore, always v will be higher or equal to 0 and less or equal to c in the best case. So for example, if the particle does not exist at all in the outer time, it exists only in the inner time, its velocity will be summation of all c's from 1 to n over n, so it will equal to c. And if it exists in the outside time only, without really going through the inner creation, but of course this is not possible. This is actually possible only for one directional, like for example black, dark energy, because it exists in orthogonal dimension. So it's actually only existing in the outside time for us, and therefore its velocity is 0. Therefore its temperature is 0, and that's why it's dark. Okay, because it's not moving with relation to us. However, it's moving, but it's moving in the other direction, orthogonal direction. So it's affecting gravity, but not affecting heat or motion or electromagnetism, and that's why we see it 0. So this is the limit of dark energy. This is the limit of vacuum. This is the limit of void. This is the limit of vacuum. So the universe is actually fluctuating between this and this, between real time and imaginary time. So now, the state of vacuum from our point of view is C0, because it's creation in the inner time and no motion in the outer time. So it's a flat space, like the Bose-Einstein condensate. And this happens when the outer time, when the imaginary time is 0. Okay, because the complex time together, since it's hyperbolic, it's t r square minus ti square. So therefore this ti is actually interrupting the continuous flow. Tr is because it's moving at the speed of light, which is actually in its own frame. It is continuous because it's infinite, and therefore it's continuous creation. Therefore, if there is no external time, this will remain a flat space. Only when there is external time, this will interrupt the internal time, and therefore Ti cannot actually exceed Tr. So Ti can either be 0 or maximum Tr. If it's 0, we have C0. If Ti equal Tr, we have Cc. This is actually also a vacuum, but it's a vacuum of higher level or higher dimension. So actually we have more than one level of vacuum. That's why we have actually 7 heavens and 7 earths. So there are 7 levels of vacuum, because we have 7 levels of time, 6 internal and 1 external. And for each level of vacuum, we have 1 level of void, which are the levels of earths. We have 7 earths and 7 heavens, 7 levels of vacuum and 7 levels of void. Okay, so this is actually equivalent to our normal physical world where we live. Our vacuum is C0, whereas the orthogonal vacuum will be 0C. Now, we can get to this either by restricting the time between 0 and Tr, or restricting the velocity between 0 and c. Because if you put Ti equal Tr, then you will have x over c. Therefore, if you replace, you will get Ti equal 0 and v equal 0 for when they are equal. Okay, if Ti equals 0, you will get v equals 0, and if Ti equal Tr, you will get v equals c, as we already said. Now, So as I said, so the normal state of our vacuum happens when this imaginary is zero, imaginary velocity is zero, but actually this is not the external velocity, the total velocity. It must be zero for all vector velocities or movements, no real movements. Therefore, actually, it's like zero temperature. And that's why this state is equivalent to the Bose-Einstein condensate. It happens only at the extreme state of zero temperature where no movement of whatsoever, no even motion of any electrons or any protons. Of course, this is extreme state, like absolute zero temperature. Only in this case we will get infinite Euclidean space, which is vacuum, either described as Tr0 for Ti or C0 for velocity. So this is our normal vacuum, but there is also opposite or orthogonal vacuum that is 0, 0C. Now, so as I said, therefore we have two arrows of time, one for our own vacuum and one for the other vacuum. And that's all because in the hyperbolic split complex numbers, we have positive signature and negative signature. So we are actually living in the positive side and there is a negative side. However, even for the, suppose we are living in the negative side, we will see it as positive and we will see the other one as negative. So it's a reflection actually, just like looking in the mirror. Okay. So actually it's 0C for us, but if we were there, it would be C0 or CV for that space. Now, okay. Therefore, we have supersymmetry. So we have the normal physical world, and the other actually describes the psychical world, but now I don't really want to explain why it is the psychical world, because this will take us to a completely different area. But believe me, it exists, and actually these two worlds exist together, and they are always in continuous communication and continuous conversion from these states to the other two states, because if you combine these two supersymmetrical states, you will end up with full vacuum and zero void. So when you combine CC plus 0, 0, you will get 0C plus 0 plus C0. So the whole world, every point in the world, at every single point of time, it's always converting from void to vacuum and from vacuum to void, and in the process it separates to the two supersymmetrical world. Of course, this annihilation is happening at the points of geometry, and that's why we don't really see any effect of it. Because normally, if you have such a interaction, like matter-antimatter pairing or pair production, you will have, of course, very high energy, and this is even for the smallest micrograms, it will have a disaster or a explosion. So this is happening on the whole universe, yet it's not having any explosion or any big effect, and that's because it's happening sequentially, as we said even from the beginning. It's happening at the points of geometry one by one, and actually it's the source of our cognition and perception of the world. So our perception is in reality the meeting or the combination between the two extreme or two orthogonal arrows of time, and therefore causing a point of information. This is like light, and this is like zero, and this information is splitting into matter and antimatter. It's really very new idea. I don't know if this short description will be convincing, but anyway, let me now summarize for you the three possible states of the flow of complex time, which include the two arrows of time, and also the third, which is combining or making a new direction. Now, of course, we cannot really, as you know already, we cannot reach the speed of light by simple acceleration. But if you combine the two vacuum of C0 plus 0C, you will get CC, and therefore you will reach the speed of light only by pairing between matter and antimatter. So this means that we have actually three levels or three possibilities of the flow of time. Either the internal time is always less than the real time, which is in our case, we are living in this world. Always we cannot interrupt the real flow more than the real time itself. So always our internal, our imaginary time, our normal time that we are living in is always higher than, smaller than the real time, and therefore we have normal matter. So we have this state CV. So we have full inner time, full inner velocities, which is the velocity of creation, and limited external velocity, and therefore always Ti is always less than Tr, and it can never reach it except when we accelerate to the speed of light, which is not possible by acceleration, by simple acceleration. So this is our level of existence. In the orthogonal direction, where Ti is higher than Tr. However, this equation is correct from our side, from our point of view. But if we were living in that plane, we will see Ti as real and Tr as imaginary. So now we see our time as imaginary and the space is real, but actually it's the opposite way. Our time is imaginary and the space is real. If we are in the orthogonal direction, we will see the imaginary time, which is now our time. We will see it real and the space will be imaginary. So it's just like looking in a mirror. Therefore, that vacuum will be, as we said, will be described by C0, and the creation there will be described by that will be described by 0C, and the creation will be described by VC, which is a state of antimatter. Now, only when Ti equals Tr, which is not possible by simple acceleration, as we said, we will get a new Euclidean space, which is CC, like in our case, it will be spherical vacuum. And if you are in a spherical vacuum, if you again accelerate or you combine to this new, you get this new C, you will get a new dimension. So whenever you reach the speed of light, but not by acceleration, you reach the speed of light by pairing with a symmetrical vacuum. If you pair the two vacuums from 0C to C0, you will get 00 plus CC and the opposite. Then this new CC will be a new dimension or a new vacuum equivalent to the C0, but it's a higher level of dimension. So now let's derive some equations which are actually all known to you, maybe from special relativity. Very simply, actually, the proper time that is known in relativity is actually equal to the modulus of the complex time, because the complex time is split complex. It's actually hyperbolic. Therefore, because of this minus, if you take the modulus, you can just derive from this. You divide here by this Ti, and therefore instead of x over c square, okay, you will get x square over Ti square, which will be the velocity square over z square minus 1. So in the end, you will get the proper time. But you will get it minus for the same reason that we said, because for us, the time looks real and the space is imaginary. Why the space looks imaginary for us? Now imagine that you want to think of any segment of space. You need at least 3 moments of time to imagine any small segment of space. Suppose you have a line of A, B. You have to think of A, you have to think of B, and you have to think about any relation between them. For example, how long, how close, etc. Therefore, you need at least 3 moments of time to imagine any portion of space or any segment of space. Of course, normally you need even higher, many moments of time. For example, if you want to imagine an area of space or a sphere or any shape, you need some time. So this means that our time is actually imaginary, and the space is real. So that's why here this minus is there. But it's a reflection of reality. In reality, the space is real and the time is imaginary. But because we are going through time by ourselves, we feel that it is real. Okay, now, actually this negative here is very important because we will see later that this will be inherited by the velocity, the momentum, and even the energy, and therefore this will allow us to derive the equivalence between inertial mass and gravitational mass. And also it will allow energy to become multidimensional because, as I said, in our normal physics now, we think of energy as a scalar only because we have one direction of time and we think it's real. However, if you take the different possibilities of time, of the flow of time, 6 inner levels and 1 outer level, at least inner and outer. So we have real and imaginary, and therefore we have real momentum and imaginary momentum, real velocity and imaginary velocity, real energy and imaginary energy, and therefore this can be positive and negative and even multi-dimensional because the real have more than one level of time, 6 levels of inner time. Now let's move to the main part, which is how to derive the Lorentz factor, and then after that how to derive the mass energy equivalence. So Lorentz factor actually is straightforward because just by looking at the hyperbolic relation or the split complex relation between the inner and outer. So if you are creating space at the speed of c and moving in the imaginary time at any speed v, therefore the actual velocity will be a combination between these two that are perpendicular in each other, but not normal orthogonal, it's hyperbolic orthogonal. Therefore, the actual velocity will be the square root of c square minus v square, and therefore the gamma, which is the Lorentz factor, is cosine this angle here, which is equal to 1, actually tanh this angle is v over c, so cosine will be 1 over 1 minus beta square, which is the same Lorentz factor that is already known to you. Okay. Now let's move to another important point, which is the concept of ether and the cosmological constant. And this is actually a little bit related to general relativity, however, even to special relativity, because as you may know, the concept of ether were considered that it's obsolete or not valid after the advent of relativity, because no more, the Michelson-Morley experiment proved that the ether have no effect on the speed of light. And that's because ether was thought of as something filling space. Now, with this new theory of the duality of time, ether is itself space. And even Einstein, actually, when he overthrew the concept of ether, he said, even at that time when he was developing his theory of even special relativity and also general relativity, he said that the new concept of space-time, the interrelating space and time, is actually equivalent to ether. However, still ether was just discarded because no more has any effect. With this new theory, ether is actually the same as vacuum, because now space, the vacuum, the empty space is physical. It's not anymore something empty. The difference between this duality of time theory and the vacuum in the duality of time theory and the normal vacuums that we think of before, at least in the general relativity, is that the vacuum of general relativity is a simple mathematical vacuum. However, in our duality of time, ether and therefore vacuum is physical because it's space being recreated. It has points and structure, and therefore it's more quantum mechanical. So it's like the ground state of for example, particles and motion, and that's why we said matter, for example, is described by CV, while vacuum is C0. So when no external activities happen, when zero temperature outside, we get the vacuum, which is equivalent to the Bose-Einstein condensate. So this new ether, therefore, is actually able to explain why the speed of light is constant, because as we said, this ether is equivalent to C0, and therefore it's the speed of light is a motion in the inner level, while the velocity is our motion in the outer imaginary level. And because these two levels of time are orthogonal on each other, they don't feel each other. So no matter how long, how fast we can move in the outer time, we cannot affect the speed of light, which is the speed of the vacuum, that is the ether. So they are orthogonal, and therefore ether itself is being recreated as the speed of light, and it has no effect on the outside, no matter how fast we move. But of course we cannot, as we already proved, we cannot move than the speed of light. If we try to move than the speed of light, and if we ever get higher than the speed of light, not by acceleration, of course, by pairing with other supersymmetrical particle, we will be in a higher level, and therefore we will create a new dimension. So the good news is that when you take this ether into account, you will actually get rid of this cosmological constant problem, because this new ether now has energy, and therefore this is dark energy and dark matter. So if you take it as void, as a lower level, which is a ground state of matter, it is dark matter. If you take it as a higher level, which is CC, it is dark energy. And therefore this will be the starting point to reconcile the concept of vacuum in the theory of relativity with the concept of vacuum in the quantum mechanics, and therefore we will be able to solve, inshallah, the cosmological problem or problems, because actually there are more than one, as you know. So in the duality of time, as we said, the ether or the vacuum is something physical, and it is the same as the vacuum, and therefore the state of vacuum is C0. However, in the quantum field theory, as we know it today, because we consider that the space exists all at once, all the planes of space exist together as we imagine now. Therefore, we have to calculate this 0-point energy by summing over all the space, and therefore you will get actually infinity. But in order to get a finite value of it, you have to use a cutoff at the blank scale, as everybody believes that space, which is actually wrong, but now at least this is the current belief, that space becomes granular at the blank lengths. Therefore, if you enforce this cutoff, you will reach a finite value. However, this finite value that you reach is really very high comparing to the experimental value that has been found in 1998 of the vacuum energy, or the cosmological constant estimation. And the discrepancy between them is really very, very huge, which is equal to 120 orders of magnitude. So that's 10 to 120. Just if you want to imagine how big is this number, the number of all particles in the universe, if you estimate them, you will get about 10 to 80, which is known as Eddington number. This actually is the number of protons, but anyway, if you suppose that the proton is composed of, for example, quarks or even any other particle, you may increase this by 1 or 2 orders. So you have even 40 orders higher than the number of particles, the discrepancy between the cosmological constant and the 0-point energy calculated from quantum mechanics. This discrepancy is really very huge. This discrepancy will disappear in the quantum, in the duality of time theory, because we should not sum over all the states. And therefore we should take the average, because only one point exists at a time. So if you do this same calculation and take the average, and therefore you have to divide by the square root of the number of points or the number of modes in the unit volume, this number is 10 to 117, and therefore you will reduce this discrepancy from 120 to only 3, and actually even less, because there are here other numbers. So this small discrepancy can now be solved very easily using the various models of quintessence, because even now there are many models which suppose that if we believe in ether or in quintessence, we could reduce this discrepancy by 2 or 3 orders. So actually, with these two concepts together, you will remove any discrepancy between the cosmological constant and the 0-point energy calculated from quantum mechanics. Now, one last point before we go to more derivations for the mass energy equivalence, and I promised to show you at least 4 or 5 different derivations of how to derive the mass energy equivalence relation. But now, since we are speaking here about supersymmetry and the vacuum and the void, one of the big problems in the standard model is what is the origin of mass, because according to the calculations of the different levels of symmetry, different symmetry sets in the current standard model, we get the different particles and symmetrical generations of particles. We get them through rotations and transitions or translations from points or bosons which are have zero mass. Only we find practically that particles have mass. We cannot really get or find the mass of particles without knowing them experimentally. If you go through the theory, you will get only zero mass particles. So to explain the mass of particles, how can we get masses for some particles, which are the fermions, we have to use this Higgs mechanism based on the spontaneous symmetry breaking, and this is actually successful relatively, but it's still this same model cannot really explain why the Higgs itself is actually very, very heavy, as you already may know. So this may explain how some particles can gain mass, but how the Higgs itself got its mass is not possible. However, in the duality of time, because the vacuum is superfluid, and let me remind you again why it is superfluid, because if you have CV as a normal state of matter where you have internal creation at C and imaginary motion at V, so if you want to get to the state of vacuum, you have to reduce this V absolutely to zero, not only as external velocity, but as any vector velocity of the components of the particle or the object, and therefore this will be identical with zero temperature, which means that absolutely we have no interaction in this medium, which is a state of vacuum. All its points are identical. They are indistinguishable because they don't interact with each other, and therefore this is a Bose-Einstein condensate. This Bose-Einstein condensate describes the state of a superfluid or supergas. It's superfluid for C0 and supergas for 0C. They are actually equivalent, but they are orthogonal to each other. So if you believe that the vacuum is a superfluid, you will be able to understand, or you can derive how some particles can get mass. Already we have some mechanism for this, like for example in superconductivity, which is known for many people. But now I want to skip this, because in this duality of time theory, we have an even deeper and more profound principle of how to get mass, where the mass is coming. Even without this idea of superfluid, we have a very basic principle, even from classical mechanics. Because classically, the reason of inertia is the delay that we get when we have when the interaction move from one part of the object to the other part of the object. And because this delay, this interaction cannot be higher than the speed of light, so we need time to raise any object or to move any object. And from here we get the inertia. So this means that any object must be composed of particles, and these particles have smaller masses, and every one of these particles have components with smaller masses, until we reach a point where we have smaller subparticles which have no mass. This is not known now in the current physics, because we stop at some points. We stop. For example, we believe that matter is composed of atoms, and atoms are composed of protons and neutrons and electrons, but we cannot go further, at least not further than the quarks, for example. But according to this duality of time theory, ultimately any object is composed of monads, and the monad is a point of space. So if it's a point of space, it has zero mass. It's CC, for example, or C0. So it has no motion. Only we get motion and we get objects when we combine monads together. So when you combine many monads, you get objects. So every monad have zero mass, but when you combine them, you get mass. And the reason why you get mass is because you cannot create two monads at the same time. Remember that this duality of time is based on the idea of the single monad. And the single monad model means that we have only one monad creating everything. So this monad is appearing in one state and then going back to vacuum and appearing in another state, and so on. So at least we have two monads. These two monads cannot appear at once. They need to the monad need to disappear or go back to vacuum and go back again to from void to vacuum and from vacuum to void at least twice to make the minimum object composed of two monads. But of course, this is the minimum case, maybe for neutrino, for example, or even other lighter particle. For higher particles such as protons and heavier, we have maybe millions, or I don't know, maybe actually comparing between this cosmological discrepancy, or the number that we got in the previous slide, which is 10 to 120, comparing this number to the number of particles, which is the Eddington number in the number of particles in the universe, the difference between them is about 10 to 40. So I believe that the proton, for example, is composed of 10 to 40 monads, 10 to 40 points of space. So it's really a very huge number, and from here we get the mass. But the minimum that we can get is 2 points or 2 monads. So the reason why these 2 monads have non-zero mass is because they don't exist at once. If they exist at once, they will appear, they will come from void to vacuum, they will come in zero time, and therefore they will have zero mass. But the monad, the single monad, which is creating everything, need to go back to vacuum, void, and come back again, and so on, to create every monad separately. So we will need time to raise this object from zero to any speed, and therefore this is the cause of inertia. Just like for example the piano, the piano key, the keyboard of the piano. So you click the keys one by one, and therefore if you click together, you will if suppose you click them all together, you will get one sound. So you can always produce one sound. If you want to produce a note, you have to click them one by one, and therefore any note or any piece of music will require time. And here the same, if you suppose these are the points of space, so if you want to move them, suppose for example you want to carry this object, suppose you want to carry it from here, you need to wait until these other points lift up, and therefore you get inertia. Suppose this is all one piece going together without any structure. You can lift it all together at once, and therefore you will need zero time. And this is true only for bosons, which are of the structure, in our case, of the structure Cc, not C0. So they are higher vacuums, they are energy. But our normal vacuum, lower vacuum ground state is C0, and therefore we need velocity in order, we need imaginary time in order to move it, and therefore we have inertia. Okay, so this is really very difficult. Now, finally, let me also, already actually I've spoken about this, but let me explain to you again how we get to general relativity from the single monad model of the cosmos. Because we have seen so far that Lorentz factor, we can derive it from the basic equations, and we can derive the proper time, and we will see how to derive, for example, the mass energy equivalence in many ways now. Therefore, if we suppose that this is really a better, higher theory of than general relativity, then of course general relativity must be obtained from this theory at a certain condition. Just like, for example, special relativity is obtained when we ignore gravity, and classical mechanics is obtained when we ignore the relative velocities. So this is called the correspondence principle. Any higher theory must contain in it the previous series. So now I am saying that the single monad and the duality of time theory automatically contains general relativity, and we get to general relativity when we approximate the outside motion, the apparent velocity, when we approximate it and we consider it all real. So if we suppose this is our world, if we suppose that all the points in our world are real, and therefore the motion is real, and therefore we have infinitesimal transmutation, then we get a positive value of velocity, and therefore we get a continuous space. This is not the reality. The reality is that these points are happening one by one at a time, and therefore we don't have, as we said many times now, we don't have real velocity, we don't have real motion, we have zero velocity at every point in time, but we are averaging this change, just like this point, this laser point is moving now. So when I move this here, it's actually the computer monitor is actually recreating this point at every new position. So at every moment of time, its velocity is zero. However, outsidely, we watch and we see some velocity and some continuity. So if you take the phenomenal level, you have continuous velocity, continuous space-time. If you take the reality, the metaphysical level, the monad level, the recreation at every point of time, of the real time, you have discrete points of view, discrete points of space, and zero velocity at every point. Only you have average velocity outside. So when you are averaging, you are getting to the general relativity. This approximation is automatically implicit in all our measurements and all our life, because we feel ourselves, we are being decepted, we are deceived, and we think that we exist in a real time, and therefore we think of the existence as being continuous and coexisting together. In reality, it exists only one point at a time, and therefore we have discreteness. So from here we get a special approximation for the general relativity, just like general relativity itself can be approximated to special, and the special can be approximated to the classical or Galilean relativity. Now we can move to the last section of our presentation, which is how to derive the mass energy equivalence relation. Let me again stress that this energy, this relation, in its simplest form and in its relativistic form, cannot be derived in the current relativity. Many people don't understand this. many physicists even believe that this equation is already built in the special theory of special relativity. Einstein himself tried this many times, starting from 1905, and many times later he published many papers. In the end, all these papers were discovered that he made some approximations unjustified. He was criticized by Max Planck, and he himself acknowledged this many times that even by the end of his life, he acknowledged very clearly that the theory of relativity, special or general, or the electromagnetic theory, is not enough. The principles are not enough to derive this equation. This equation, is of course correct. It has been proved experimentally, but there is so far no real direct derivation of it, exact derivation. There are some approximations, of course. And the reason why there is no possible derivation based on our current understanding is exactly because we are implicitly approximating the actual discrete geometry to the continuous geometry where we believe that things coexist together. So here, this figure shows very clearly that if you are moving through the outer time, where you have here this x-axis as a momentum and this y-axis as a speed. So if you are moving in the outer time where we are actually working, just like now we are moving in the outer time, therefore we need time to move, not instantly, we can't move instantly, and therefore we get this triangular integration, and therefore we get this kinetic energy that is half mv squared. So here we are moving outside at the speed of v, and therefore our momentum is mv and our speed is v, and therefore the total energy will be the square, the area of this triangle, which is equal to half mv squared. In order to reach this equation, we must suppose that the object moves from 0 to c instantly. And of course, this doesn't happen. It can't happen. The object cannot move from 0 to c at all, neither instantly, neither by acceleration. However, according to the duality of time theory, I am saying that the object, for example, when we have, for example, matter-antimatter annihilation, or when we have light absorption, when the C collapses to 0, when the light is absorbed. So this interaction is happening instantly in our time, but actually it cannot happen in the physical sense. It happens only in the inner time, where things have zero mass, and actually always the monad is bringing things into existence from void to vacuum, from 0 to C, or vice versa, from vacuum to void. So the monad is always doing this, is not moving in the outer time. Therefore, in the inner time, automatically we will get this square area, which is equal C by MC, so MC squared. Very easy. We don't actually now need to do anything further. But even though, I will show you now many derivations, exact derivations, but because now I am taking a long time, I will go through them very quickly, and I will leave this PowerPoint slides for you to download and see more derivations. Actually, I will leave even to you the full book of the duality of time and its consequence on general relativity and quantum mechanics. I will leave it for you to download free from my website, Smonad, smonad.com, Smonad, singlemonad.com. So let's now, in the remaining time, very quickly see some different derivations of this duality of time. But before that, let me stress to you that you may find on the internet some derivations, some people who claim that you derive this equation. However, these derivations, either they use approximation, or they use the famous equation m equal gamma m naught, and then they derive or they differentiate the mass, and this is actually again not correct, because you cannot get this equation from any simple principle. The equation m equal gamma m naught is equivalent to E equal m naught c square. So these are equivalent. If you derive one, you will get the other. And therefore, it's like a round statement. So the basic idea, as you can see now, we are starting from classical mechanics, is we derive the energy, the work, for example. If you have any object and you want to move this object by a distance from 0 to x, so the energy or the work you get is equal F by dx. So if you do that, you will get V dmv. Therefore, you will get here this equation V square dm plus mv dv. And actually, this is a really mysterious equation. Normally, in our classical mechanics, we consider m constant, and therefore we cross this and we say this is 0. However, this is true, but this actually here is the seed of supersymmetry, because here these two terms, the reason why this is 0 is because it's going in the opposite direction, in the orthogonal direction. And from here we will see that this is really the seed of supersymmetry even in classical mechanics. But now for the moment, let's suppose classically that dm is 0, and therefore we have mv dv. Now you can therefore integrate this. If you want to integrate it in a classical way, according to this arrow of time, you will get half mv square, and therefore this is a classical equation. However, if you want now to integrate on this arrow, on this inner time, okay, same thing here, but sorry, this not yet. It's actually the following slide. But then here, let me stress to you, as I already explained, that these two equations are equivalent, and you cannot rely on this equation to get this equation. You may find on the internet some derivations of this mass energy equivalence based on this equation. It's possible, but how do we get this equation? This equation is not available in the special theory of relativity. It's only supposed to be true based on the similar time dilation and length contraction. This equation looks the same. So these are possible to obtain through the Lorentz transformation, but this equation cannot be obtained. Only we suppose that it's there, and therefore from this we get this equation, or from this equation we can get this equation. These two equations are equivalent, and we cannot depend on one of them to derive the other. Also, these two equations, when we combine them together, we will be able to get the modern relativistic momentum energy relation, which is now maybe considered the true form of this equation. They are actually equivalent anyway. So this equation, or this equation, or this equation, these three equations are equivalent, and therefore deriving one of them means deriving the other, and therefore you cannot rely on that, otherwise you will be going through a round statement. So let's now see this slide. So as I said, if we now integrate over this inner time, and this integration actually is no more integration, it's actually summation, because you have only two states. So you sum over all the monads only from 0 to C, or only 0 and C. You don't have any medium between 0 and C. So the object only moves from non-existence to existence, or from void to vacuum, or vice versa, from vacuum to void. And therefore, if you sum over this, you will get m c squared, supposing that m is constant, and therefore dm equals 0, and therefore you put here dm equals 0. However, this supposition is actually not correct. Only it's correct in our world. Therefore, in reality, we have two terms, and each one is taking account, is doing. It's actually splitting. This symmetry is splitting. One is going in one dimension, and it's creating the same particles, the same MC, but in orthogonal direction, and therefore we get the same mass, the same energy, but we don't see it because it's supersymmetrical. But anyway, this maybe we will talk about it later. At least now, for classically, if we suppose that dm is 0, then we get 0 plus mc squared. So now this is the opposite side. If we suppose that the outside velocity is zero, and therefore the monads are going from zero mass, from fermions, from bosons to fermions, then we are generating mass. As we said, we generate mass by moving by the monad moving from vacuum, from void to vacuum sequentially without going through the outside time, and therefore we are integrating only on the inner time, and therefore here it's the opposite case. It's actually this one will be zero and this one will be c squared, because of course in this case you are moving only at the speed of light because you are moving in the inner level of time, so always v is c. So this c is constant, c squared is constant, and you integrate from 0 to m, you will get m. So it's again mc squared. So this is actually happening with this one that we have seen on the previous slide. They are happening together, but not on the same level of time, on two orthogonal dimensions, and therefore we have supersymmetry and splitting of this supersymmetry at every point of time. So in fact we have two masses, two energies, and therefore we have supersymmetry. Time is running out and I'm getting tired, so I will move a little bit faster. You can actually also, this is another method, you can find automatically the relativistic energy in the inner and outer time together by integrating this same equation at the same time, but however, you have to consider the inner time first and the outer time second, and therefore you will get this equation. Maybe you can review it and study it later. It's actually very simple and straightforward. Another method yet is by integrating also on the inner and outer time, but integrating the momentum. But remember now the momentum becomes complex, and therefore it have real and imaginary part. So you have to integrate on the real part first and the imaginary part. But in this case, you have to put the complex form, which is indicated here by the complex number j, which is a hyperbolic. And therefore, if you do this integration, you will end up with this real and imaginary part. You can verify these equations. They are very easy to follow. But here you will get minus. So this minus here actually, in our equations now, in our current formulation of relativity, we see it as a plus. The reason of this is because we are considering in our normal life, we are considering space to be spherical, and therefore we are working with normal complex numbers. However, in reality, it is hyperbolic, and therefore it's minus, and that's why we don't have imaginary time. So if we have imaginary time, or genuinely imaginary, with relation to the real time, therefore this relation will be split complex, and therefore it will be hyperbolic, and therefore we will have minus. And this is very important because this minus will be the reason why we get the equivalence between these two sides of the equation. So when you put them together, you will end up, when you put them equal, you will end up with the same equation, and therefore you will get the equivalence between the inertial and the gravitational. Because if you think about these two terms, one of them is related to the gravitational and the other is related to the inertial. And maybe this will be more clear even when we go to the next, which is getting the same thing almost, but not from complex momentum, but from complex energy. Because as I told you before, even energy now becomes complex and multidimensional. So let me again skip this to save some time. And therefore, if you derive, you remember that the force is actually the derivation of momentum per time. However, because the momentum is conserved, and remember the momentum is conserved even when the velocity changes, because this is complex momentum, not normal momentum. Normal momentum, of course, if you have motion, you have change of velocity, and therefore you don't have conservation of momentum. You have conservation if you have collision between different particles. But I mean here, for the same particle, if the velocity of the particle increases, the momentum will increase. However, for the complex momentum, it will be always conserved even when you accelerate, even when you have a change of velocity. And that's because the change in the real part of the momentum will be compensated by the change in the imaginary part, and the total will be imaginary. The total will be zero. The difference in the total will be zero. And therefore the force will be also zero, because remember also the velocity is zero at every time. So in reality everything is zero. But this zero is the complex part, and therefore it has two parts. It has real and imaginary. So when you put them equal, not equivalent, because remember in the current, in the original thought experiment of the general relativity, we get the equivalence between the inertia and the gravitational through the Gedanken experiment of the space accelerator or the elevator. And we obtain this equivalency, we obtain it by induction. Here we are obtaining it by equation, and this is a very big difference, because here it's mathematics, it's exact derivation, and therefore it's no longer, they are equal. However, doing this derivation, which gives us zero, is really not very easy, because with this new fractal, I didn't really speak about this too much, because it's really a little bit different from our presentation today. But actually the new geometry is fractional or fractal, and therefore we cannot really perform this derivation using standard calculus, because this new geometry, it's no more differentiable at every point, and therefore you need to apply special rules which are very difficult to obtain now. And only here we get complications. As you have seen, until now we are using only classical mechanics, classical equations. But if you want to go through the details here, you need to really go through more complicated mathematics, which is beyond our lecture today. So time is running out very quickly. I am now going to mention this final slide, I hope, which is the conservation of complex energy. Again, please read this by yourself. It's already, I think, understood. So you can do the same thing for energy, just like momentum. However, you'll see here minus, and this minus is in our time, it will be plus, because we consider that we are living in a real world, which is spherical, normal, complex, but it's actually here hyperbolic, and therefore it's half world, and therefore it's minus, and we have the supersymmetrical. Together will be positive. And actually this is yet another derivation, because if you follow this equation, you will get E equal mc square, like also a new method of deriving this fundamental equation. Now, I promised at the beginning to give you some talk about the quantum, the logical quantum interpretation, the first logical interpretation of the quantum behavior. I don't have enough time now to do that, but very quickly let's go. Actually, there are many theories already who have tried successfully to obtain the quantum behavior based on a fractal spacetime. But this fractal spacetime is not really correct, because how can you make spacetime fractal when you have different space and time and space are different? It becomes genuinely fractal only when space and time have the same unit. So here, because our time is time, our space is time, it's complex time, it becomes genuinely fractal, and therefore using the same theories already present, we can now use their already different methods to get the different quantum mechanical behavior. But here we go even further, because if you follow this more, you will understand why you are getting supersymmetry, as we already explained before. But now let me skip this because we talked about it already. Let me move further. Let me only mention this important point because it's one of the main ideas in quantum mechanics, which is the uncertainty principle. Now we know already that for example, the higher momentum you get, the less certain will be about position, and the smaller dimension you get, the less certain will be about momentum. But we don't know why. The reason why is because the object is made of many monads, let's say n number of monads. and it's being recreated from 0 to c at every sequentially. And therefore, at any real point of time, only one monad exists at C, while the others have already collapsed, because remember, we have single, so only one at C and the rest will be at 0, but at 0 after they made their contribution. So in the end, the momentum will be given by this equation. Therefore, because we have one monad at C, the position of this monad will be uncertain completely, because if you are moving at C, the uncertainty will be infinite. So we have only one infinite uncertainty, while all the rest of points have been already defined, and therefore the uncertainty will be proportional to the number of n. If the number of n is very high, only one, for example, in a million is undefined, then the uncertainty will be very small. And this is correct for large objects, or for example, objects moving or not moving. However, for very small objects, which are composed of smaller number of n, the uncertainty will be very small, will be very high, and also we will get high uncertainty when the object becomes move faster, because if the object move faster, it means that on average more and more points will be on the speed of light, and this will be on c, and therefore the total velocity will be higher, and therefore the momentum will be higher, and therefore the uncertainty also will be higher. So here we have a new equation that can give us an estimate of the value of the uncertainty based on the particle itself, how big it is it composed of small number of monads, is it moving faster or less or slower. All this is now a new idea of uncertainty. The same can be also said about the collapse of wave function. So actually, automatically the points are collapsing to 0, except the real current one. So the final collapse happens at the moment of measurement, and therefore only we know the total state at the moment of measurement. However, let me add here that for small systems such as a small number of particles, and because the observer is always part of the system, then the uncertainty will be related, the collapse of the wave function will be related to the observer, because the observer is itself a monad, or contributing to the system, because it's doing the measurement, and therefore the very observation can affect the measurement, especially for small systems. And therefore, for example, in the case of Schrödinger cat, the cat can be dead or alive. The state of the cat is already defined before we open the box, but we only know after that, just like now in the classical Copenhagen interpretation. But the only addition here is that the effect of the observer, for example, if one is watching his own cat and he is tied to it with like the same as entanglement, is entangled to the state of the cat, he can change the state of the cat before he can, for example, delay the spilling of the toxic material, and he can affect the experiment, and therefore the result will be related to it, especially when we have entanglement. And here, of course, this is a very big area where we have parapsychological effects that I really cannot speak about now, and I want now to conclude. Maybe I have already mentioned non-locality before, but let me again, since we are here, this is, I think, our final slide, that with this new ideas of entanglement and our understanding of entanglement and non-locality, the interaction between the different points can be close to instantaneous. Actually, it cannot be instantaneous, but can be very close to instantaneous, irrespective of the distance between them. Yet it's not even for example, suppose two particles at different points, different edges of the universe, they can interact in a very short time, much shorter than a normal travel, even if you are traveling at the speed of light, and that's because of the recreation. So we have non-locality explained without breaking the speed of light. Remember, because the speed of light is the speed of the creation itself, while the motion is in the outer time, and therefore they are orthogonal to each other and they don't affect each other. And I think here, finally, this is the final slide. With this new system, we can now easily understand the cause of causality, or the reason of causality. This is very simple. It will take only 1 minute, I promise. And this is because the universe, since it's self-contained space now, it's not contained in space, it's physical vacuum, and therefore it's self-contained. Therefore, it's a closed system. And therefore, any change on any part of this closed system will cause subsequent change in other parts, and therefore you will have subsequent causes. So any change in any part of the universe will cause corresponding synchronizing change. However, the new thing here is that this change can be non-local, can be even non-temporal, it can be changed in the future, maybe long future, and even can be retrospective, because you have now 2 arrows of time, but I think this point is not easy to explain, so I will skip it and then I will finish. And I thank you all for watching this long presentation, and I will put for you, as I promised, these slides and the paper or the book you can download from my website. I will put for you the link. Thank you very much, very much.